Okay, so I'm here with a special guest. And what's your name, special guest?
My name is Al Cortez.
That's right. It's my dad. He's back.
Again.
We want to talk about two films that we just saw. That the first thing would be we saw Napoleon. What was that, like right around Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I think right after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And then after that, or right after Christmas or New Year's, I guess, we saw Ferrari, right?
Yes.
And for me, like going to Napoleon, like the interest was pretty much only because of Ridley Scott. I mean, I like a lot of movies that he's done over the years, and I didn't really have a deep understanding of like Napoleon, like the man, the historical figure, only by what you learn in school, right?
Correct.
So, what was it for you? Like,
well, to an extent, like you stated, Ridley Scott has done movies that pretty much everybody has either seen and have admired.
Yeah.
The fact of Napoleon is something, I guess this is maybe more of a generational thing, me being sort of a history buff was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So from two different points of view.
Yeah.
As far as Ferrari, I'm not really a car person, but as long as it runs.
Uh-huh.
But yet the name Ferrari stands for something.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything other than just the name.
So I didn't even connect this really until after we saw Ferrari. And, you know, I wanted to see this movie, Napoleon. I wanted to see it, and I know you wanted to see it, so we went to go check it out. Ferrari, I knew I've been wanting to see this for a long time. And, you know, you joined me with it. So, you know, I think we came away with different things, but afterwards it occurred to me, it's like, wait, these are both movies about men, historical figures. The movies are named their name, right? Like,
correct.
That's it. I mean, Ferrari, it's also a brand, but it is the man's name, his last name. And so it occurred to me, it's like, wait, I think these films have more in common than I originally expected.
From that point of view, yes. I mean, to me, Napoleon is a pretty thick book or a big story to translate into a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so much about Napoleon in general. Mm-hmm. I don't think 3 hours or even a week worth of movies, you could get it all in there.
Yeah.
Where the opposite was Ferrari, they hit a specific time, a shorter time period, versus Napoleon trying to cover from the age of 24 to his exile and demise.
Yeah, that was a pretty lengthy time they tried to cover. And I mean, I think we talked about it after we saw the film. We're recording this, over a month later. But, you know, the thing that I think struck us both was like Joaquin Phoenix, if he's a great actor or if he's an okay actor or whatever, he was trying to play a lot in that movie. Like young Napoleon, the rise, and then, you know, later in life.
It didn't translate. The subject matter, I was all for it.
Yeah.
Napoleon. It would be the same thing with Caesar, for the sake of that. But it was too much, and he had too many roles to play, too many different roles to play. A young one, when he looked his age, 56.
That's 57. The thing that it distracted me.
Right.
Like I felt like it took me out because like I know, because for me personally, like Joaquin Phoenix we're almost the same age. Just I've watched him in movies being almost the same age I was and up to today. So I'm like, I know he's in his mid to late 40s or whatever. But still though, it's like, but he's playing someone who's in his 20s or I think late 20s, right?
24.
At the beginning of the film. Yeah. And so right away, I just, it takes me back of like, this don't add up, you know? And once you get later into his life and some of the campaigns and all that, I think it gets a little closer. It feels more like age appropriate. But the other thing was, and we both, I think, caught on is like, where's the French?
Accent,
Yeah, accent or even the,
manner.
yeah, exactly. Like it really took me back. And, you know, and I've talked to some people recently about it. And when I've mentioned like but the accent thing, right? And some people don't even notice it or it doesn't bother them. But to me, it was one of those of like, wait, every character in this film, well, most characters are French. And I think almost none of them had a French accent.
I don't recall one. If
Like,
there was, it was missed.
like even the other people in the
The
French
background.
government and the other characters, like they had English accents.
Right.
And Joaquin Phoenix just rolled in with an American accent. And it's one of those where, like, it reminded me of, and I think I told you before, the Robin Hood movie with Kevin Costner, where,
There you go. Yeah.
you know, okay, it's Kevin Costner. You need a name to get the movie made or to get people to go see it. All right, but give it a little more.
I would agree with that. That was pretty obvious from the beginning for me. That and just Joaquin Phoenix. Obviously, some of the movies he's done, I think that he's done very well. But in this one, he was just out of place for me.
It felt strange.
Yeah,
And the thing that occurred
like
to
he
me,
was working too hard.
yeah, maybe.
I mean, to me, it's like he was working too hard in some of the scenes where he wants to show his Napoleon might have been a little eccentric.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like he was working too hard. Yeah, I
Um,
mean the movie itself. I mean, it's fine. You expect some discrepancies.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, is it going to be historically correct? I don't think one ever is historically correct. So you kind of
Right.
you kind of give way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this the character it was just out of place.
I mean, I think it was a good idea. Like the film, the premise of doing a film like this is to really tell a story that is about this man and maybe his obsessions or his, what do you call it?
Even his demons.
Yeah, and what drives him, right, to become or to do the things that he does. And so I can appreciate from that aspect, you know, that it's trying to tell a lot and maybe dig underneath a little bit, like just what we know from history books, right? Because he even goes into his relationship with Josephine and how that is kind of strange and it's kind of a power dynamic thing where in that period, I don't even know if that was something that people acknowledge, but today I think, you know,
Very French.
but today it's probably a thing that's a little more front and center, like with people dealing with marriages or relationships or whatever. It's like, you know, who does what, who's responsible for what in the relationship, and then how does that show itself to the world, all that kind of stuff. I thought it was interesting to try and tell that part of the story. It's just everything else around it where, you know, the thing for me was we see like behind closed doors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Correct.
then when we see him out in the field or out, you know, in the world, you know, all those different diplomatic things that he has to do, like I felt like that kind of got short shrift, you know, because that's a big part of how things happened in that period in the world.
Unless the point was to show that he was more of a military
Yeah.
geared, military minded versus a diplomatic, you know, way of thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I'm assuming that whether it be him or Alexander the Great or Caesar or Patton,
Mm-hmm.
it's win first,
Oh.
worry about later losing.
I could see that. Yeah. And maybe that's it. I just didn't pick up on it as like, if it's to show like, oh, he's like he's like a bull in a china shop. Like,
Yeah.
there's no delicacy. There's no
Yeah.
diplomacy. Yeah.
I'm going to win. The idea is for me to win and for you to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
With all that said, I mean, I think the subject matter was to cover was just,
It's a lot.
yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I think in comparison, since then I've seen one with Rod Steiger, and there was another one, and those showed more Napoleon as the military person.
Okay.
How he went planning his engagements, nothing with very little on his relationship with Josephine. So it shows him to be more of a dominant hero, go for it. Where in this one, it was trying to show you too much of an individual.
I now that you're saying that, I really struggled to think of like what other depictions of Napoleon have I seen that like I can like instantly recall, and I can't think of many. Me personally, and maybe that's just like that's one of those blind spots for me. It was like oh yeah, they've made a bunch of movies about Napoleon. I just never saw them.
Right.
I mean, the one that I could think of like right off the top of my head wasn't he in Time Bandit? Wasn't there a version of Napoleon in Time Bandits?
Yes.
Or am I thinking of?
No, Time Bandit. There was one in there.
Yeah, because they were like jumping all around through history and everything, right?
Yeah. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
But yes, there was a reference to Napoleon in there.
I mean, he's not the main character or anything like that, but I'm really struggling. I'm like, when else have I seen Napoleon in a film, like as the main character, right?
War and Peace.
See, I've never seen it.
I mean, there's obviously it's from one side only.
Right. Okay.
From the Russian side.
Yeah.
And there's a thicker story, a bigger story than that.
Yeah.
But there is a reference to it.
So what was the one that you were saying? Because
Waterloo is the name of it. It's actually that's
Waterloo.
The name of the Waterloo.
Okay. And it's Rod Steiger.
Yeah, Rod Steiger.
Okay.
And it is about the downfall. In other words, his last actual.
Oh, well, of course, Waterloo. Yeah. Okay.
So, and that's what it's about. And Rod Steiger, I guess, once again, had no accent.
Really? Okay.
And if anybody remembers Rod Steiger from In the Heat of the Night,
yeah,
very dominant, kind of take up the screen.
Yeah.
And I think that would probably be true of the real Napoleon, that he walk in the room. Yeah. And he filled the room.
Yeah, heads turn.
Heads turn.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe for your own safety, but heads turn because of what he accomplished at the age. I mean, you can't take away his achievements, but you also, there's a lot of things about him that even now we still don't know. And how accurate are we ever going to know? We'll never
That's
know.
the thing that surprised me a little bit is there's so much written material, whether it's books or even like in the film, they show like the letters that they wrote to each other and how those eventually ended up in other hands. And they were used in the movie to show like their relationship because you have it in writing,
right?
The way they felt about each other. So that's where I was like, I didn't know that was a thing like that. Today, of course, right? There's so much that is documented about everybody in some ways, but especially about, public figures. But back then I didn't know that would even be available,
Overall, for me, the movie, sitting there watching it, obviously I was already intrigued, just like other movies that came out like Patton and then, and so forth. But as I'm going through there, things kind of started to filter in. I mentioned it during the movie when they were charging at the very first battle scene where he's charging and you can hear him breathing. I found out later that they mic'd everybody. So everybody had individual mics. And I'm like, wow, that is so great because you can hear him breathing hard and his energy, enthusiasm or whatever. Yeah. You're like, oh, wow, that really stood out.
I did see something else about that, like staging all of those battle scenes and they shot this movie, if I remember right, like in 60 something days.
62 days.
Yeah. So to get it all done so fast, they used so many cameras at once, right? And I from what I understand, that's a lot of how Ridley Scott works on every film. Because, just knock it out, because we shoot it from like 8 different angles. So we don't got to reset up and move and do all that. And one of the things I read was about the battle scenes. Some of the people that were in the middle of the battle scenes were cameramen.
Yeah.
So when you look at the wide shot, which has those people somewhere in there, there's cameramen in the group, in the fighting and everything.
Right.
But then you can cut to that shot right away, and it's all done at the same time. So I was like, wow, I don't know that I've ever heard of somebody doing that. But it looks like it would be chaos. And you don't want to throw like, a expensive camera or film equipment into the middle of that, But that's how you get it done fast, I guess. So,
I mean, overall, I would I see the movie again? Yeah, I would. I would like to see the one with the
that's
director's cut, I guess.
When you think of Ridley Scott, or at least I always think a lot of his films are great. Some of them are maybe not as great, but he's come back to a lot of them several times. And Blade Runner, most specifically, I think there's like 5 cuts of Blade Runner. Like if you really dig and find them all. But like Kingdom of Heaven, the longer version of that, I think is a better film.
Which I haven't seen yet.
Kingdom of Heaven?
I've seen the original, the theater.
Yeah.
But not the director's cut.
Oh, yeah. It definitely kind of rounds out some of the stuff with the characters and why things are happening. What was the other one? There was another one that he did. Well, Alien. There is I guess a special edition. I don't know that really has a lot more footage or whatever, but he's gone back a few times to kind of add things back into his films. And that's the thing with this one, right? It's like supposedly there's like a 4-hour cut of this movie. And, we've talked about it. It's like, well, if it ever makes its way to Apple TV someday, yeah, let's see the long version. Even if you got to break it into episodes or chapters or something like that. Like I'll do that, because that is the other thing I caught the sense of is like, it seems like it just like hops through
time.
Yeah. So fast.
Yeah.
Like, especially like in the first half of the film.
Easily could have been a series, a better series.
Yeah.
Than a better movie.
Mm-hmm.
If it would have been a 10 episode.
Yeah. That's something that occurred to me is like, there's got to be more. It just felt like it brushed through so much at the beginning of the film. And I feel like, we missed something.
But it is a big subject. I'm going back to the first thing. It's a huge subject to cover. I mean, you can take JFK's assassination. That is not something you can pinpoint it to maybe a week or maybe a day. But the bottom line, and I'm using JFK, is actually the assassination.
Right.
Everything prior to that.
Yeah, and I wonder about that, like films about public figures. I mean, one thing if it's like just a regular person and their real story and something extraordinary happened to them, okay. But if it's a public figure that is so visible and so much might be documented about them, well, I mean, I think for most people, even in that, walk of life, like things don't always connect to each other. Right. Just like you or I, we go through life like this happened 5 years ago, and then this is going to happen, next year for me. Family, job, whatever it is, and like those things don't always. There's not always a line you can draw from one to the next, and that's sometimes the problem with a biopic is like, well, this led to that and caused that. Did it?
Yeah.
So I could see that. Like that could be a tricky thing to make happen and tell it right so that it's entertaining also.
Right.
But that said, right. So that was, I guess, the thing that turned Napoleon for me. Like it was so much to try and tackle. I think the film looks beautiful. There are moments like the coronation scene where it's like every shot in that looked like a classical painting.
Correct.
Where the lighting, the composition, the wardrobe, everything, it was like, I feel like I'm here. like in what 1812 or whatever the time period was. And so it's hard to look past that. And I'm sure it's by design, like make this film beautiful at least, whether you understand the characters or the plot or anything. It's like, that's one thing you can count on Ridley Scott is like films are going to look amazing.
Right.
And so that's where, it's not all about like, I didn't like this film or I want to cut it down or anything. It's just got things that I would have liked to seen better. And maybe there are those pieces that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, that are not visible. I mean, there were parts of it, like you were saying, when he said he found the crown.
Yeah.
And he holds it up. Well, and I don't recall saying it during the movie, but I think I said it afterwards, where that's from another movie.
Mm.
And I went, and for the love of me, I can't find it, but I know I've seen that particular scene.
Okay.
In another movie or something similar, and which is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. But what really threw in, like you said, that image was beautiful. You could just freeze it. You're like, wow, that's pretty good. The lighting, the texture, the tone, that's pretty good. And then he speaks. And that American accent, the accent just, wait a minute, that voice, no, the voice just killed it.
I wonder if part of it is that because he also takes the character on like in such a deadpan way. Like I feel like, he brings a certain energy to it, especially earlier in the film. But later in the film, as Napoleon's getting older and seeing more and doing more, he really dials it down. Like I mean, there are scenes where he just moves his eyes. Like he doesn't do much. And then when it comes to like lines and stuff, it's almost like kind of mumbling, kind of very stiff.
They almost sound deliberate.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm sure it is a deliberate choice, but it's one of those where I'm like, and then he doesn't even sound French on top of that.
Yeah. I mean, it may sound as, from my point of view or from my side, is there's more flaws. I don't think there's that many. There's just
no. It's nitpicking, but
some of them are obvious.
So that made me think. I was talking to somebody the other day, and the thought had occurred to me. It's like, well, wait a minute. So Ridley Scott, British, makes a film about a French emperor, basically, starring an American actor and a lot of other English and other European casts. I can't think of a name right away, but like a legendary French filmmaker with a legendary French actor or, a highly talented French actor.
But who?
Well, but that's what I mean. So, of course, the thing is, well, you want to get the film made, right?
Right.
And you want people to go see it, right? So you put names that people recognize. I got that.
Chris Lambert.
But the thing is, like, I almost, now that I've seen this, I almost want to see that film instead. Because it's not like, oh, this is something that happened in France. Like, this is a French story.
Right.
It's not to say that you can't make a film that's like outside of your, I don't know, nationality or your background or whatever. It happens all the time. But seeing how this one panned out in particular, it just makes me think, okay, there's going to be a French director that's going to say, no, I'm going to make that story right.
There's room for improvements in it. And
of course,
like I said, the missing pieces or the 4-hour version may solve that problem.
Right.
And if that's the case, then they should have just...
what I was saying, I don't mean to be like, well, Ridley Scott doesn't know anything about this, as a subject matter to make a film about it. Cause I mean, you could. And because that's the other thing is the other film we're talking about is Ferrari, where Michael Mann, he's from Chicago. So does he have any like claim to make a film about a legendary Italian automaker and a public figure? Probably by the same logic, probably not. Right.
Right.
But I mean, I think the thing with that film is that it is so clearly like a real passion, like the cars, like not just the cars, but the man behind the cars, like
Well,
this.
you caught him at you didn't catch him trying to go from youth to age.
That's
You
the other
caught
thing.
him at let's say the pinnacle of his life.
Right.
Now, and I'm gonna give a thumbs up to Adam Driver.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was spot on. I think he was fantastic. He was very good. And I'll say this: he's not. I think he's like 40 years old now, 41 maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
He's not an overly attractive man.
Why are you coming for this man's looks?
But as an older man, how he was shown in this movie, he's going to be, if he's anything like in the movie, he's going to be a very well-rounded, mature individual.
Yeah.
I mean, he really came across his body language, his manner.
I was going to say, yeah.
The man even had a good-looking haircut.
I mean, it's a real, like he cuts a real profile.
Yeah.
Like when you see him on screen, a lot of times he's wearing the dark, like the sunglasses.
Right.
And he's got kind of a similar style or like a suit or whatever. So those are things you can kind of hide behind a little bit, but I mean, it cuts the right profile. It's like, that is that guy. That guy is that guy,
This is where whatever steps were taken to get the right individual, they found the match.
Yeah. Because I think he even did, a good job of conveying like the struggle that the character was having. Because this story in this movie, it is really dialed into like 1 year basically, or like a few months in his life. And how much things were turning around, like either for good or for bad, right? And to catch this person, not only in a business situation, and like because of the racing, because of making the cars, selling the cars, and the company's in trouble or whatever, but also like his relationships, right? Multiple.
His loss of his son.
Yeah. And his younger son, how does he integrate that or claim that as part of his life? Like all of those things, I felt like you could see that going in his eyes, in his performance of like, this guy's got a lot to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, he handled it beautifully.
Well, I think it's one of those things, like it's funny we're talking about these two films because it made me also think about a lot of other more recent like biopics and that kind of thing. And I guess part of the challenge with this kind of a story is you want to try and encapsulate all the things that led this person to do what they did with their life, with their business or whatever. But you have to, especially in this one, because it's so compressed, like with the time, you have to find a way to make history a part of right now, things that happened in the past, like he lost his son.
Right.
And it doesn't happen in the film. It happens before the film happens, but you see that it's still wearing on him and it hurts and with his wife, his son's mother. So that's the kind of stuff that if you find ways to edge that in there and to make it part of the character, even though it doesn't happen, right? It happens before we even start the movie.
But that's storytelling.
Well, that's what I mean, right?
That's wonderful storytelling.
Like, that's why I think this film, even though it's very similar in some ways to Napoleon, like just in the broad sense, I think it works better because it is so much, it's dialed in so narrowly into this specific moment. Because you get the same thing. You get him struggling with his relationship. You get the triumphs, you get the losses.
Right.
And you get all the setbacks and all that. But I think by not trying to tackle so much all at once, like biting off way too much, you can let all this stuff cook in like 2.5 hours, whatever it is.
Right.
And it feels natural. It doesn't feel like you're just jamming everything in here, all the events that we can get in here. Um,
I mean, truthfully, that's aside from the character's portrayal,
yeah,
that's the biggest difference in there.
yeah,
One's too much, and
yeah,
the other one keeps you entertained. It keeps you locked in.
yeah,
You know, because you don't have to concentrate.
right,
Because if I went into it with Napoleon, went into it like, okay, he's fought these 60 some odd battles. He's only lost once. I'm like, oh my God, how are they going to get all 60 battles in there?
right.
So, okay, so which ones are the most well known?
Hmm.
You know, so of course, obviously Waterloo.
Yeah,
You figure to see that in there.
sure, right.
And then some other ones. But was now, on the other hand, with Ferrari, just the name. That's all I knew. The
Yeah,
cars. And then I found in the end, I found that to be more intriguing, more interesting, because my expectation was not met over here.
mm,
Where this one I had no expectation.
yeah,
And I'm not a car person. I'm not, you know, it's a car.
yeah.
But some folks, I mean, it's like naming, you know, the
Well,
car.
I'm not big into necessarily European automakers or whatever, but I do know that Ferrari is a very special kind of brand. I mean, not just because of the quality of the cars and all that, but they're very protective, right? So, like, you buy a Ferrari, there's going to be documentation that you cannot do certain things with this car.
Right.
Like, you can't modify it in certain ways, you can't use it, drive it in certain ways, because they don't want their cars being seen or being perceived as like, oh, you put a giant wing on this thing, or you put like, 22-inch wheels. No, you don't do that with these cars.
No boom boxes.
Yeah. So it's a very particular brand. And I guess the people who are fans of the brand or the cars, collect the cars or whatever, they understand that. Like, there's a different kind of passion to it,
Mm-hmm.
versus being
A Mustang.
yeah, maybe like a Mustang owner, or like me, a Dodge owner, or even like a Mercedes owner.
Right.
It's a different type of
Well, there's a different appeal,
yeah,
for one,
right,
visually.
yeah,
Also, I mean, you get in the car, how it handles, how it feels, how it navigates.
yeah.
I mean, so every car is different.
Well, that's an interesting thing that I saw in the movie that I didn't really know, is that the cars that they sold, or at least at that point in time, not necessarily today, but the cars that they sold then were former race cars. So like, they were on the track. Remember the one, like the prince or the king or whatever that comes
Right.
to buy his car or pick up his car, and it's like right off the track. It's all wet and everything and dirty. I'm like, okay, you clean it up because he's here to pick up his car. And that's one of those things like, oh, so they're not made for consumers. They're made for racing. But the idea is like, oh, that's right. It is a different kind of car. Like, this is actually a race car where, we'll put a license plate on it, but it's really meant for the track.
Right.
So, I think that speaks to the type of people that would be interested in that car, but also speaks to the type of person that would make those kinds of cars. Like, their goal is not to sell millions of units every year, or thousands of units even. Their goal is to win races.
Yeah.
And if that one benefits the other, great. If not, I mean, that's where we find the beginning of the film where they're in trouble because
financially.
Yeah. So that wasn't a thing I really understood about Ferrari, like just as a brand, and certainly not like why.
But even in the movie Ford versus Ferrari,
yeah,
I mean, there's parts of it in there. I mean,
that's right. Yeah,
there's parts where the two men, obviously Henry Ford,
yeah,
second, and then of course Ferrari himself.
That's interesting. Yeah, because that movie is set like I think 10 years later, right? Like the late 60s,
something like that. Yeah,
and you go into the film, or the characters even they express like, okay, we got to beat Ferrari. Okay, you're talking about doing the impossible. So even just 10 years after this film is set, Ferrari is now taking it to the next level where they are unbeatable. And Ford is going to try and do the impossible by trying to beat Ferrari. And that's a big turn,
Yeah.
But that I guess that speaks to the dedication to building the best cars, or the fastest, or whatever, most powerful, I thought this was an interesting way to look at it because it wasn't focused on the cars.
No.
There's racing in it, and there are scenes where they're talking about building the cars or how to improve the cars, that kind of thing. But it's not it's not at the forefront. It really is about
it's all secondary.
Yeah,
Or even further back.
and
Because the only other brand they mentioned aside from Ford, I think, was Maserati.
Maserati, yeah,
That was, as far as I know, that I can recall.
and that was like the kind of rival
Yeah.
of the time, right?
Yeah, and Fiat did call.
That's right. Yeah,
Fiat did call.
they made a bid.
Yeah,
They got turned down
in their little car.
Yeah.
I did like that scene that says, "When I asked you once before, you said no." Like, when was that? 1917.
Right.
I was 19 years old, something to that effect.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought that was okay.
It's like, hey, you gave me your answer. I'm sticking with it.
Yeah. So it's, and you can tell that tells you something about the man. He was
Exactly. That's what I mean, right?
he's determined.
Yeah.
He's not going to take no for an answer, and he'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah. That's a little thing of like, you're telling me a lot about the man by just, kind of a amusing moment.
Yeah.
But it says a lot, Now, not knowing necessarily how the film ended, I didn't even realize like it was going to end with the event that it did, like the big race at the end, which it makes sense. Like you want to end on a big, moment of triumph.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the film ends, I mean, we sat there in the theater and there was, I don't know, maybe half a dozen other people in the theater with us. I didn't even count, but I just felt like all the air went out of the room.
Oh yeah.
In that last race when, let's just say, it's just
gasp for air.
It's just a horrific event that happens. And, if you haven't seen the movie or if you don't know the history, it will take your breath away. And, because I really thought, we're leading up to the big win.
Yeah. Who's going to win between the Ferrari drivers?
Yeah, because it's like, well, okay, Ferrari wins either way, but like which guy, who's going to get the other, kind of edge the other guy out. Well, the way it ends, it just totally, it floored me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those things that I'm curious to see, like.
Even the first accident.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The first one.
And that's the thing. So, and I got to say this because it's something that with both of these filmmakers, Ridley Scott and Michael Mann, and maybe more specifically with Ferrari, because it paints such a authentic and like honestly kind of a romantic picture of this man and the place, like Italy. Like it's filmed in Italy. You see the
cobblestone streets.
Yeah, you see the landscape, when they're out on the roads and stuff, and it's like this just looks like a love letter to this brand and this man, and it can kind of lull you into like a false security of like, well, this is going to be a good like a safe, like a secure
good feel.
Yeah. He's got his troubles, whatever, but when those moments come. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. This is the guy that made Heat with the massive shootout in downtown Los Angeles. This is the guy that made Collateral, where Tom Cruise ran around the city killing people. Oh, that's right. Okay. So when those moments come with these crashes and these horrific things that happen, you're like, oh, okay. All right. You tricked me.
It's Michael Mann.
But I remember now.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Ridley Scott, like some of the moments in those battle scenes in Napoleon, even just some of the things that, go on with him personally. It's like, that's right. It's Ridley Scott. He doesn't pull punches. Like,
you can pick most of his movies.
Yeah.
There's something there.
I mean, all the way.
Both of them.
Yeah. 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 All the way. I mean, these guys, both of their earlier movies, like Alien or Blade Runner, they can be violent. They can be disturbing. Or Michael Mann, his first film, Heat, which I'm not Heat, Thief, which is, I don't remember it being overly violent or anything, but it's taken a real like gritty look at like the criminal mind, And I was like, okay, yeah, you got me, man. Cause I wasn't ready for that last, it stunned me into silence. Cause I'm like, I don't, if you've ever seen like video or race footage where, somebody goes into a wall or wipes out or whatever, it can look pretty rough, pretty intense. And the way it's depicted in this film, though, because it's even worse than like a crash at a racetrack. I mean, it involves like pedestrians or bystanders or whatever. And it's slowed down just enough. Like it doesn't happen quite in like real time. It slows down just enough where you can see what is happening.
Or about to happen.
Yeah. And it's one of those that's just like,
But
man,
even after that, even when you see the aftermath,
wreckage, yeah,
the aftermath, you're like, oh, you kind of, you feel for everybody.
It's one of those things that it did kind of stick with me for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Like because, I thought about it. It's like, I guess in another film or in most other films, like you would see the car, because it like hits something in the road, right? Like the little markers in the center.
Yeah, one of them was broken.
It hits one of those, the tire blows out, and then the car kind of loses control. And in another film, you would see, you see the driver maybe lose control, and then you cut to the people standing, nearby, and then you cut to the car like zagging in a wrong direction, and then you cut to afterwards. Well, like in this film, no, the camera follows the car, and you see everything that happens, and it looks legit. It's one of those moments where I'm like, man, how many people got hurt making this one shot?
How many people got hurt in real life?
Well, yeah, but I'm like, just to make it for a film, like somebody must have got hurt when they filmed this because it looks real, and that's the power of it, because you're on the ride for the whole thing, and then to just like pull the rug out from under you, and it's not like it's just to shock you. It does show you afterwards, like you said, all the what do you call it, the shockwaves of that, whether it's Ferrari himself and having to deal with like the responsibility or the guilt of it. And then like the company, like is the company at fault for, all this that happened? And
he was going to win the biggest race.
Yeah.
To get him back in the race.
Right.
And now he was potentially could have lost it.
So it's one of those things. It's totally just like it's a side swipe. No pun, I guess. But
but on the flip side of that, it shows you a softer side of him.
Yeah.
Where at the end, how the actual movie ended.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I don't remember the exact wording. It's just, I want to introduce you to your brother. Mm-hmm. He would have loved you. He would have taken you everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, you see the man struggling. I mean, you see all this, everything prior to that. You see all his faults and, of course, his drive for perfection or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you see this horrible accident that could ruin him. And you're like, how's he going to recover from this? Yeah. Well, he did. Yeah. But then you see a softer side of it, taking his 4 or 5 year old son. You see a gentler side of a man in the world that can be extremely cruel.
Yeah, and in a time where you probably didn't acknowledge things like that. There's a couple moments in the film. I think it's the first time he goes to the. I wouldn't say grave, but
cemetery.
But it's like in a like a mausoleum type of thing, right? Yeah. Where he goes there, and if I remember right, like he breaks down.
Yeah.
But it's only because he's behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And nobody's there to see it, And whether that's accurate or not, but I think it speaks to that time of like, I don't wear this on my sleeve necessarily, but I have my moments when it is impossible to handle this.
Right.
Yeah. And, I've dealt with that myself. I'm sure a lot of people have, to deal with loss or grief, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting to see that on film from like someone who's supposed to be like an iconic personality and figure. It's like, yeah, everybody's got those moments, those moments where it seems like nothing works or nothing's working right.
Right.
And
they can feel the weight of it.
yeah.
And then in contrast, you can take like Patton.
Yeah.
You never saw that. George C. Scott.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all
business,
straightforward. Even when he slapped the soldier, it was all uniform, being in place. His march to the balcony.
Yeah.
I mean, his opening speech.
Yeah.
Of the movie.
Oh,
I mean, just like defiant.
Well,
you never saw the flaw in him. Other than the ambition.
No, you're right. I think the thing that film did, and it's kind of related here, I guess, but it's like it still showed that he had heart, that he had a certain kind of warmth. I wouldn't say a complete warmth, but like he cared. Yeah. Now, whether he cared about just killing everybody that was on the opposing side, I mean, maybe that's one way, but he did care about like his legacy, and he did care about honor, right? And those a little higher minded things, but like that's part of it. Now in the film, they don't show him like breaking down or kind of losing himself, but that could just be, it just wasn't a thing you would put in a film in, was it 1970, something like that when that came out? But like if they made that film today, maybe there would be a scene like that in there where he kind of, falls apart to himself in private, I don't know. But
it's how you want to portray him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously I'm picking two extremes here. Mm-hmm. Well, Patton being the extreme, but in this particular movie, Ferrari, I mean, you saw lots of sides of the man.
Yeah.
Who was competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was sitting down with his son and showing him about the engine, if I do this, I do that,
right,
or I trimmed it a little bit, smoothed it out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for somebody like me, I would like, wow, here's a man that can actually sit down at a drawing board.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And can go to an engineer and they know apples to apples and not apples to grapes or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, if that is really the case of the man, you can see why he was as successful, because he knew what he was talking about.
That's the thing, right? I think that's important, like to show, especially with this kind of a story, even Napoleon in a way, it's like he wasn't just a personality. Like he knew his stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it was combat or strategy or racing or strategy and racing,
right,
or like the mechanics or the physics of a car, So all in all, I mean, I thought these were both good films. I thought Ferrari was a much better film.
I would say it was the better film.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, how nitpicky do we want to be? I definitely love some of the scenes in Napoleon.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, even some of the battle scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, like, wow, that's great.
Yeah.
My eyes are, I'm like a kid. I'm like, oh my God, give me a horse,
mm-hmm.
and a sword. But, I think still better storytelling as far as Ferrari.
It just feels tighter. It feels cleaner.
It feels like a good song,
mm-hmm.
For me,
mm-hmm.
it's like a good song, and I'll put it this way, it's like a good song that I could dance over and over and over again with my wife.
Mm.
I mean, it just feels like a good song.
Yeah.
To me.
It flows in a real organic way.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't feel like anything got left out.
And to tell you the truth, I don't even know, was there a musical score to this thing?
Yeah, I was about to say that when you said the song, because I'm like, usually there's like at least one song in Michael Mann films, like something that of the time or of the right mood or something, but I don't remember a single.
I don't even remember hearing that note.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even remember music.
Yeah. I'm not sure there was.
But I think that speaks to the film, like how powerful or how effective it is that you don't almost need it,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I thought it was a good film. I would want to see that one again. Well, maybe except for the last part.
Yeah, I would see it again easily. And
Yeah.
Napoleon, I'm going to wait for the 4 hour version.
I would watch it if it were more like
Yeah.
a more rounded out, filled out version of that story. But I don't know. We'll see if that ever materializes. I'm still keeping an eye on Apple TV, and they haven't showed a date to when it'll be available. So.
Yeah. Now, I think as far as Napoleon, I think the one thing for sure, if it was me and I had to redo, it would be Joaquin Phoenix would not be in it. It just, come on, Johnny.
Yeah.
I loved him in that Johnny Cash movie. I think he should have got an Oscar for that.
That's right. Yeah.
I just finished watching one where he's, no one will know you were ever here. And he's,
I haven't seen
it. It deals with missing trafficking.
Oh yeah. Okay.
He goes around, killing people.
The first film that I did on Film Street was Joaquin Phoenix. Don't worry, he won't get far on foot. Which he plays a real life. It is another biopic. He plays an artist who, if I remember right, he gets into an accident. He goes out drinking with a friend, or not even a friend, just another guy. They were hanging out. Gets into an auto accident. The guy survives the accident, and kind of he doesn't see him again, but he ends up paralyzed. And so he just goes hard into his artwork, like as a way to kind of, going through recovery, because he was also, he was a raging alcoholic. He goes into art, uses that to kind of work through some of that. And it's about him, the recovery process of kind of getting clean and also discovering like some things about himself. And it's a really interesting movie. It's not quite a comedy. It has a lot of comedy in it, but it's got some pretty serious subject matter in it. Mm-hmm. But it occurred to me as like, because I thought about that the other day. I said, oh, you know what? Actually, the first film I did here, it was one of his films. And Johnny Cash, the Joker. And it's like, he's gone like all different places, mm-hmm. like in terms of things that he's played. So I almost felt like this should have been like a home run. Like this should like,
you would think,
but whatever the choices were, or the reasons for the choices, it's just one that it took me out of it so much. And look, even if we back up a little bit, like House of Gucci, right? Came out 2 years ago now.
Something like that.
Ridley Scott, another Ridley Scott film. Adam Driver in it, playing an Italian again, right? And like one of the members of the Gucci family. And I'm like, okay, well, I asked for a Ridley Scott film where they used the correct accents, and I got House of Gucci, I guess. Like, and that didn't turn out to be so great. Ooh. Yeah. That was a messy film, and it kind of, I don't know, kind of made me wish I didn't ask for that, But I feel like in Ferrari, at least, it was a subtle way. Because Penelope Cruz, not Italian, plays a distinctly Italian character, I think.
Oh my God.
And just a firebrand, just like, you do not want to mess with her.
Yeah.
And so I think the idea was, it felt more authentic. It felt more like.
Yeah. When we got out, one of the first things I said, they did it wrong, but it was not a good look.
But I think it
was a very effective portrayal.
Yeah. I think
for the role.
That was a part of it, or at least that's the way I saw it. Like her walk, she walked like an old woman. She carried herself in a certain way. She spoke
no nonsense.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, I know that's not Penelope Cruz. Like she's not showing up to play herself. Like that, it must be how that woman really was. But
and it's only because you see him so debonair.
Yeah.
Clean shaven. Uh-huh. When he got his hair cut every week.
Yeah.
Thursdays at 3:00. Beautiful tie, silk tie. Shoes.
Yeah.
And then you look at his wife, you go, oh.
Yeah.
what happened here?
But I think that speaks to it, right? Is like she handled the death of their son differently.
Yeah.
And in a much harder way, you know.
Oh yeah, she dealt with it harsh,
Yeah.
or he came across as I moved on.
Or he put it into his work. You know?
He put it into his work. And he was more concerned about the beauty of the car
right.
than he was about the beauty of his wife.
Yeah.
Because he can't sell his wife, but he can sell the car.
She can't run that fast.
She can't go that fast.
She can't outrun the Maserati.
No, man. She gave him hell, that's for sure.
Yeah, she missed him by about 4 inches. That's all I know.
I want my gun back. I mean, and we've seen enough movies where actor or actresses, they gain weight, lose weight, whatever.
Yeah.
But I went like, oh my God, what they do to her? Because I was expecting attractive, mature woman, maybe some silver hair.
Yeah.
But I think she played the role.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
In hindsight, I'm like, oh man, you couldn't put nobody else in there. Or with these two characters, you could now replace them with other. Oh, we're going to reshoot it with Russell Crowe. No, that ain't going to happen.
It's weird to say, like, I think they had great chemistry together in the scenes they had together for a couple that is like on the outs, like you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't think that means great chemistry or even any chemistry, but they matched each other, like in intensity and in the fire that they brought, And even when the moments when they have to like have a conversation, not like, just shooting shots at each other, like you can tell, like, yeah, there was a past there.
Yeah.
Like there was a time when these two liked being around each other.
It was passionate.
Yeah.
Because you could see how it's not passionate now.
Right.
I mean, you could tell that whenever that was, it must have been very passionate.
Yeah.
But I think she, like I said, my first reaction was, I'm sorry, Penelope Cruz. But
yeah, no, I heard you. I was sitting right there. I heard you go like, oh my God. After watching the film, I really tried to think, like, what stuck out? Like the whole, with Napoleon, like, oh, they didn't do accents. So what in a Ferrari was like, man, they should have done this instead. And I can't really think of anything.
I can't think of anything because I didn't have an expectation. I went in there very open-minded.
Yeah.
And once again, like the first one we did, I want to be entertained.
Yeah.
And do I like it?
Yeah.
And will I see it again?
Yeah.
And then these three, all three, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The
only expectation I went in with was this is a Michael Mann film, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I based it off of films he's done in the past, and they're not all necessarily a certain type of film. He's done crime dramas and he's done historical epics, Last of the Mohicans. But what the thing I always take away from his films, I mean, everyone I can think of at least, is it's always about a single person, usually a man, but their drive, like to stay on target, like to get the job done, whether it's a crime or a race or, fighting off the English or, whatever it is. It's like you can just watch this one character go through this journey and things are real, right? Like things that are happening on screen are real and they feel like authentic. Like you could actually just stand there and watch this real event happen versus, there's no like CGI. There's not a lot of explosions. I feel like, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, maybe Heat is probably the most action packed or Collateral, I guess.
Yeah, but there's an explosion.
A lot of stuff with cars, though.
Yeah.
A lot of those films have things going on with cars, which maybe that's the through line. But that was the only expectation I went in. I don't have a real fascination with the brand, the Ferrari brand, or any of the history of it or anything. Even racing, like I didn't know about this race that's in the film, this 1,000-mile race or whatever it is. I had no familiarity with that. So it was really just like, I'm just going to trust that this person who makes these films that I liked before, gonna like this one.
For me, I guess my approach is obviously different. I could, if you name a movie, I know with the exception of the actor, maybe one or two,
Mm-hmm.
possibly three,
Yeah.
but I couldn't tell you who the director is.
Okay.
I've never, because I walk it with three basic things.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be entertained, etc., and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing else to me really matters except what I see
Okay.
or hear. Whoever made it, whether it be Scott or anybody else, yeah, after a while that list grows and you become familiar with it. But for me, it's just the movie. I mean, I don't put money on the director, even though some of them are consistently good movies.
Yeah, that's the risk you run.
Yeah,
because like Ridley Scott, like I don't like all his movies. I didn't like House of Gucci as most recently, but over the years, there's some of his films I'm like, nah, I have no interest in that. That doesn't mean the ones I do like, I like less,
right.
But it makes it a harder gamble next time I go to the theater. It's like, oh, okay, it's really got to be about the story, right?
Right.
Like, is this something I'm going to have fun with or be entertained by or whatever? Like Napoleon. Like I had interest in that as a subject matter. The fact that it was also Ridley Scott, I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like a no-brainer. If it would have been somebody else making the movie, I might have still gone to see it, But with filmmakers who don't make as many movies, like Steven Spielberg, he makes so many movies too. And I mean, you could take or leave some of the stuff that he makes.
Oh yeah.
Because it's all over the place. You can make Jurassic Park, or you can make Schindler's List, War of the Worlds. You can make Indiana Jones. You can make what's the last thing he just made? The Fabelmans, the movie about himself when he was a kid, right? But kind of a biopic of himself in a way. So it's like it could be a real up and down kind of roller coaster of like, I don't know if I'm going to like his next film. So I understand that. Like, you don't necessarily want to go by the filmmaker only. But to me, it's interesting to draw the line between them, if there is one. That's why I said Michael Mann. I was like, I feel like all his films have there's a similarity throughout all of them, if you look close enough. But he doesn't make a lot of films. I mean, compared to other filmmakers that are 80 years old, he hasn't made as many.
Wow.
No, I mean, well, because he did a lot of TV work, especially in the 80s with Miami Vice and that era. So, more of his films happened around like the early 2000s, like Collateral, Miami Vice, Public Enemies. See, now I'm just being a nerd. But what I'm saying is, like, it's strange to me that you can have these filmmakers that are up in their years, I guess. I mean, I don't know, it's another way to put it, a nicer way to put it, but they're still doing such different kinds of work. Whether it's Ridley Scott, 84, 85, Michael Mann, I think he's 80, or even Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon. Clint Eastwood's still working.
Yeah. Oh, golly.
He's in his 90s now.
Yeah. But they're still being creative. I can see that part.
If you're passionate enough about it, you care enough about it, and if you don't have to retire or stop, why would you? Right?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure none of those guys are hurting for money, because they're doing a job for a check. I mean, I think that at this point, they're probably doing it because they care.
It's something they like to do and still able to do.
Yeah.
They feel productive.
Yeah.
A sense of value.
Right.
These people are thinkers beyond, they're creative. And the director and these guys that make movies, they still have a passion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And me personally, it's good to see.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not translate on the screen.
Right.
But it's good to see because, the young, when I was a young person, I'm like, these old people. Well, now I'm an old person. now I'm that old person.
Yeah.
And I still feel that I have something to offer.
Yeah.
And,
of course. Yeah.
And I can see them doing it. And Of course, I'm never going to be at their level, but yet it doesn't mean I can't offer something to my children, my grandchildren, my
Yeah,
neighbors,
of course.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can see that,
Yeah.
and I applaud them for it, but just make a better movie.
Yeah. So, every swing can't be a home run, but it is good to see them actually land and actually make really remarkable work, just from a creative standpoint.
Right.
It could be whatever the story is or whatever, but like if it's solid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's well done, maybe it don't interest me or I nitpick it too much or whatever, but that's a big part of why I do this. And I think why we talk about it so much, even not in front of a microphone, but it's like, it's just cool to see people doing interesting work and expressing themselves, telling interesting stories, it just being entertaining, even if it's just a silly comedy, like there's nothing deep about something like Friday, right? Like it's just a movie that's just fun to just put on and watch.
Oh, you know it.
I mean, maybe there is something way down under the surface, but I mean, come on, we know what it's about. It's just about hanging out with your homies. And so like, if that's all it is, that's all it has to be.
Yeah.
If you enjoy it, you enjoy it.
Yeah, you makes your day, makes you laugh, takes the burden away.
Right.
And then, just pass it.
Yeah.
Pass it around.
But
you're right. I mean, every movie has its own value.
Yeah.
You can get out of it anything you want to, but every movie has its own value. Subject matter, there's some subject matters that I'm not too crazy about, and I have a tendency not to watch. But
horror movies, not your thing.
Yeah. There's human trafficking, child.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's there. I know it exists, et cetera, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera.
yeah.
But I don't need to see it.
Yeah,
I hear enough about it on the news, and
it's hard sometimes to really. It's hard to find the entertainment in it. That's where I found like all the films that I've watched, and like I said, it's been over a year since we did one of these together, but I counted recently last year, 2023, I watched 180 films.
wow.
Doing this, and it was something where I looked back on it a little bit. I was like, there's some films that I really enjoyed and I wanted to watch again, and that I will probably, that will kind of stick with me. But there's others that I watched that because I was trying to like, oh, let me watch films all about this thing or by this director or whatever it is. And there's some stuff where I'm just like, I'm good. I saw it once. I don't need to see it again. But because, not just because it might have been bad or something, but it was too much.
Yeah.
Or it's just something that's really touchy,
Yeah, I don't need to feel bad. I want to feel good.
Well, I could see that.
I mean, I want to see a movie and I don't want to go, damn.
Well, part of it is if you're looking for something to identify with, like I can see the value in it. Is like if I'm going through a hard time, but watching that makes me feel better about myself. You know what I mean? Versus just like just trying to make me laugh, but like show me something that's worse than I'm doing, and maybe I'll feel better. I could see the math there. It doesn't always work for me, but yeah, the idea of like really looking at films and trying to understand like why people tell the stories they do, why they make the movies they do, it's interesting to me, and that's why I do this, is to kind of get that across. It's like not every film works for everybody.
Yeah,
it is interesting to see like different takes on subject matter or types of storytelling techniques or whatever, and how those things change over time. Even if they would have made some movies in the past now, they'd be different. They just would, like if they would have made this Napoleon 20 years ago, it wouldn't be like this.
No.
I mean, you could have had Kevin Costner playing Napoleon.
I'm surprised he didn't go for it.
With the Midwest accent. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that was well, we went way long on time, but that's all right. I think that was a good way to see some movies, talk about them like this, or not, or just, you know, we don't need microphones, but still.
Yeah, well, but we do it regardless.
That's what I say every time. Is like, I'm going to do this anyway, so might as well record it. And if you're listening, share it with you. So, anyway, that's I think that's all I got to say. I think about these.
That's it. I think we pretty much give it a plus and a minus, somewhere an equal sign.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, it was good to talk. It's good to hang out. All right. So I'm gonna go. I tell you what, I'm gonna go watch something new. How about you?
I'm going to go watch the Texans play. Or somebody. I don't know. Somebody.
Football.
Yeah, I want to watch something tonight. I don't know. Maybe after the game, I might well stay up. I don't have to get up in the morning.
Okay. All right, then. So we're out of here.
Later.